That's a new feature of Zoom that it says this meeting is being recorded.
Let me
So,
put this on snooze so no one bothers us.
okay.
All right, cool. I'm ready.
All right. So I'm recording right now. And I was telling this is Covino, everyone, if you don't know Covino from the Covino and Rich show. But I was telling you that I'm starstruck. And it's cool because this is part nostalgia, part history. I've been connected to XM, which eventually became Sirius XM, I
Yeah,
don't know, 2003, 4, 5. And then since that time, my brother introduced me because he had Sirius, I had XM. I listened to Open Anthony. He listened to Covino and Rich. He introduced me to you guys. Sirius XM combined. So now I was like a mutual listener of both shows. So it's been a long time, man, and I appreciate you being here.
well, thank you, man. And I got to say, you, Charlie, the Spaniard, and your brother Ben both have good taste. Both great radio shows. And it's an honor for me, dude. I'm a fan of you in the fight world, as you know, and everything you've accomplished. And the fact that you're now into this, you and I just have more and more in common. And I look at this like a reunion of sorts, like you said. So I haven't seen you in years. You came up to the studio. I don't know. What year was that now?
I'm thinking, I think I might have been there twice, but if I was in the UFC from like 10 until off and on 14, 15, I'm thinking like 11, 12 ish, somewhere
Yeah.
around that.
Yeah, and we've been doing this a long ass time, and some people leave an impact. You're obviously one of those guys we've kept in somewhat touch,
Yep.
throughout all those years. And you got that mustache now, man. That's the one thing, you say you're starstruck. I'm like mustache struck. Like I, I keep looking at me because I'm a bozo and your mustache. I'm going back and forth the whole time. But
So,
dude, honestly, man, it's a pleasure. It's an honor to see you, and you're a good bud. And of course, I'm happy to be here, man.
it's really cool. And yeah, it's funny. I was like, I hate shaving. And I just like
Mhm.
once a week, once every 2 weeks, I have a real thick beard. And I didn't feel like shaving. I said to my wife, what if I grow a mustache? I was going home to my parents for the
Yeah.
weekend. She's like, yeah. And obviously we just laughed. But then I was like, people have mustaches. Maybe I'll just have a mustache. So,
You
but
know who you look like? You look like
who?
John. Remember the old John Stossel, investigative reporter? You got like a John Stossel. Look him up. I'm telling you, you look like a young, more handsome, obviously, and more ripped John Stossel. Look it up.
Uh, yeah, I will. But now I'm doing so like for like 4 days, I was wearing a mask everywhere and not doing any interviews. And then I started
Right.
doing interviews. And now I got to look at myself and I'm like, oh man, I got to shave that. So
Yeah,
thank
but
you for
it's good. You
noticing.
pull it off. Like I can't pull it off, man. I really can't. I look terrible, but you look great, man. And of course, I'm happy to be on the Spaniard show, where
Yeah.
I don't know if you talk a lot of fighting, a lot of broadcasting, a little bit of
You
everything,
know,
life.
yeah, I'll maybe that'll kind of be the first segue into the conversation. So I reached out to you, and we've been going back and forth for a while. And like you said, we've
Yeah.
indirectly kept in contact over the years since I
Hmm.
first met you personally. And to specify that for listeners, so Covino is part of the Covino and Rich show. They were
Yep.
on Sirius XM for quite a while, and
Hmm.
then whenever I would do these interviews, my brother and I would go into New York City. I forget the actual, it was somewhere near Times Square, 34th, 5th, 40th, something like that. And we go in this.
The McGraw Hill building on 49th and 6th. So yeah, it's kind of intimidating. It's
It
like a
is very
beautiful
intimidating.
place. Yeah, it really is. It's a really cool facility. That's the Sirius XM headquarters right
Yeah.
there in Rockefeller Center. Yeah, it's super nice. So I can imagine how you felt as a fan, and then being interviewed in your UFC days, like coming into this big giant studio. Like it's a little overwhelming, and I've worked there since 2002. So I can imagine how you felt being there.
Yeah, and so if anyone doesn't have XM or Sirius, or for me again, it's like nostalgia. It's been a part of my life forever,
Yeah.
and it's like all the guests that you hear, the Fishbowl, all these like famous guests that you've had on, O&A have had on, all
Yeah.
shows have had on. It's like in that room, and I'm walking there. Me and my brother, like from middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. Like, oh my gosh, this is the real deal. This is where it really happens. So those were some of the cool experiences from my career, where I get to be on these mainstream radio shows, meet guys like you and Rich and Spot, and just be a
Yep.
part of that, be in the studio with all this, tech and recording audio that I had no idea that I was eventually going to get into a form of broadcasting and podcasting. So it was really cool exposure. And then
Yeah.
and again, even just being on this show with you right now, I'm learning. I'm listening and watching you and listening. Obviously, you know what you're doing. You talk in front of a microphone. But those early days, it was cool for me to be exposed to that, and then kind of have like I didn't know it at the time, but learning from people like you and Rich and Spot and like how it's all done. So that was really cool training early on.
Well, what's interesting about what you just said is I'm used to taking control of the conversation, navigating it wherever I feel I want it to go, setting up a punchline, engaging with the guest, and doing my best to listen to what they're saying. I'm on your show. On this side of things, it's much different, so it really is a totally different experience when you're on this side of the ball game. I'm on your show now,
and
so
I'm sitting here as the host interviewing a host who's been in the game a lot longer than I have. So the roles, internally get a little bit confusing at times. So you can either talk or not talk as much as you want, and I'll just
no, man. I'm here to answer questions, to talk about whatever you want, man. I'm just thinking, I'm actually having all these flashback moments because I remember, I feel like you were on a comeback when you were on our show last, right? And you were promoting a fight and some other stuff going on. And I remember you brought us some Pennsylvania goodies. Like, didn't you bring us Sheets t-shirts or something like that?
I think we did. Yeah, I think we did. That's really cool. You remember that. Yeah.
And I rocked it for years, but I remember I got it from you. So a nice red Sheets t-shirt, which for people who don't know, that's like your Pennsylvania convenience store, right? Like your 7-Eleven kind of.
Yeah, they're growing up and down the East Coast, but and that's local to where I grew up, and that was a big source of pride for me to have them as a sponsor, and to bring that in and to have you guys represented, it's pretty cool stuff.
I totally remember that, yeah.
And what I was gonna kind of start the conversation about radio, you had said, or a minute or two ago, it was kind of briefed of what our conversation would be about, and you're kind of like wondering what I talk about on the show. I talk about what interests me on the show, and that's a wide variety of things, and it reminds me of your show, right? Which initially I believe was either called Maxim Radio or on the Maxim Radio station. You talk about sports, you talk about pop culture, you talk about, Maxim Radio, Maxim Magazine, basically all things pop culture that mainly your demographic dudes are interested in. But it covers a gamut of topics and subjects. And I could talk to you about a lot, right? Your upbringing, your Ben has listened to you guys, diehard fan forever. And then I've been later in my life or in my SiriusXM radio life listening to you guys. And you talk about everything. You talk about your relationships, your lives, your moving, your job, your careers, etc.
But we were really lucky to get that opportunity, courtesy of Maxim Radio, Maxim Magazine. It was Maxim Radio with Covino and Rich, because who doesn't want to talk about everything? Like, now you have to be a celebrity to get that opportunity. Rich and I were one of the last young broadcasters to get that sort of chance to do it on a national level. Now, if you're not a celebrity, to get the opportunity to do, hey, what's your show about? Everything. Yeah, right. You have to be the rocker, or a rock star to get that chance. So we were lucky to get in there when we did, to develop an audience and develop a style and develop a voice, as they say,
And it really is. I agree with that, and I share that sentiment. What is this show about? Largely, it's about lifelong learning. It's about learning, continuous learning as a human. Just like you exercise, you learn, and that's what it's about. But it does cover a wide variety of topics. That's the way I like it, and because it's my show, that's the direction I lead it in. But some people could say, well, a show about everything is a show about nothing, right? But it's
but that's the beauty of the podcast world. You're your own boss, man. So it doesn't matter. You created your own opportunity, and I've been one to shit on podcasters, not podcasting. I hated the player, not the game. You know what I mean? Like, podcasting's great. I just don't think what everybody does in the podcasting world is what Rich and I do every day for all the years we did it. It's just different. And a lot of people like to compare the two. I'm like, it's not exactly the same. But the one benefit, man, is what you're capitalizing on. You can do that. You can talk about whatever the hell you want. You can talk about fighting one day, UFC, boxing, life, mustaches, whatever interests you at the time. That's what's awesome about it.
I do want to get into the subtle difference between, or maybe the obvious difference between a radio show and a podcast. I do want to focus on that. But before that, I want to add in, I think of you guys, and I could be right on or kind of on or off at all, but you as in maybe I'll say your generation, but I think that might be too like inclusive, but your age, maybe your experience level. I think of you and a guy like Sam Roberts, who was
Yeah.
on the Opie and Anthony show, and now he's getting largely into wrestling. I currently look up to you guys as role models, as like, okay,
Thanks, man.
that's how you carry a show. That's you develop a personality, your style, etc. But I look at you guys as he was with Opie and Anthony, so he was with an established show, but it was like you guys built your audience on the fly. And like you said, you were given that opportunity, fortunately, whether it was luck or whether it was fortune, whatever, to build that. And it couldn't have been easy early on. Like, how did you fall into that situation in the first place?
Well, first I want to say, again, you have good taste. Like Sam Roberts, it's cool to see his career blossom. It's cool to see him doing his commentary on A&E during all these wrestling documentaries,
Awesome
and
shows.
seeing him take his career in all these different places. And what does he call himself? The last great
Last
broadcast,
professional broadcaster.
last professional broadcaster. And I got to back him up on that. He really is, if not the one of the. And right before him is like Rich and I. I think Rich and I are a little older than him, but we were all old enough to get our experience in terrestrial radio, learn in terrestrial radio with terrestrial hosts. And, I worked at K-Rock, New York. So, I do consider myself one of the last professional broadcasters along with Rich, but Sam might be like the last, and he's done great for himself. So that's really cool. I appreciate that. But building the audience, I think being part of Maxim helped at the time, right? So let's take it back. Let's rewind to the early days of Sirius, when it wasn't Sirius XM, it was just Sirius. I left K-Rock before Howard did. I was a van driver, promo guy. I was on the air on the weekends, just whenever I could. I was a fill-in dude, producer / host / jack of all trades, right? But I went full force into satellite in 2004. I started there in 2002, but I went there in 2004. And Covino and Rich and Maxim Radio started before Howard Stern ever announced he was coming. So when the world was excited about satellite radio, like, oh, satellite radio, this is kind of cool. No commercials, all these options. They recognized the brand name of Maxim right away. So guys were looking for like, hey, that sounds cool. So we were able to win over a lot of people just with that brand. And because there was no Howard, like they weren't influenced. A lot of people weren't even influenced. There was a lot of Canadian people, especially, that were never influenced by Howard Stern, but they knew what Maxim was. So they tuned into us, and then it's on us to win them over.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had that brand power behind us, but we were also talking about shit that reeled people in. Like, oh, you know what? I like these guys. And again, it was our job after that to now keep them there and win them over. And that's why when Maxim Radio essentially went away, Covino and Rich continued on, because we were authentic to that brand. And that's the shit we would have been doing anyway. The sports, the entertainment, the lifestyle, and like the relationship dating stuff, So I think we won people over by being genuine, by being authentic, by being humble and always there, easy to get a hold of, being interactive. As you know, like we were always interactive with our listeners, whether it had been on MySpace back in the day to TikTok and Twitter today, Instagram. We're always interacting with our listeners. And I remember there was a conscious decision early on to address people by their name. Like you're a fighter, so you're the Spaniard, right? But when truck drivers were calling up and they were like, "Hey man, this is Bo Evil," like, "What's your real name, man? Oh, you're John from Tennessee. John, you're my guy."
Yep.
And we became like in a weird way, everybody was coming up together and experiencing this new medium together, that we grew up together and all became sort of friends and family together. So it's word of mouth, because eventually Howard did come, right? And most of the promotion went into promoting Howard. It was then us relying on other people to pass on the good word that, hey, these are good dudes that I relate to, and they're talking about current and relevant shit, and they're committed to staying relevant. And even though they're bozos sometimes, they make us laugh. They don't take themselves too serious, and I like them. So that's sort of how we built it. That's how we had our run. And just being easy to work with, man. I think that's really the key, because we've seen so many shows come and go. And I think some of the staying power was because of the fact that we were easy to work with, almost too easy to work with. And we were good with clients and things like that. So we showed our value, and good with guests. We were good hosts. We welcomed you.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to think that we made you feel comfortable, you
You
know,
did. And to echo what you're saying, and not to blow smoke, but you're right. It was very friendly, and as I mentioned, legitimately a little bit starstruck at the beginning of this conversation. So you can imagine me and my brother walking in New York City. I grew up in central Pennsylvania. I never went to New York City ever in my life until I started fighting. So it was a welcoming environment. And the way I think.
Wait, by the way, I hate to interrupt, but which is crazy for me to hear, because here I am thinking you must have balls of steel to get in an octagon, you know, getting ready to battle somebody, and then in front of all those people. So what are you nervous about?
Yeah, no, there are very, it is like that, right? Like what's one man's trash, another man's treasure. It's like what scares me might not scare you.
That would scare the shit out of me, man.
But it was like, I look at you guys, because you mentioned Howard, Opie and Anthony, and you guys, you know, there's the term shock jock, which I don't consider, you know, you guys under the umbrella of shock jock. But I just think of you guys as, you know, my sister-in-law, Ben's wife, Megan, loves you guys, like absolutely loves you guys. And it's like, they I don't think they listen to my show very often, but they'll listen to this one.
Right. They have to now. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think of you guys like a family almost, like you're a family, maybe, and not to overextend my connection to you, but I feel like you could, my mom would love you, right? You could walk into my house and you, Covino and Rich, or you and Rich, you'd be like, oh, just fit in well. So it's like an extension of anyone on the road or anyone down and out looking for buddies to hang out with who talk about funny stuff. And I'll say this too, like, you're not afraid to be dorky sometimes. You're not afraid to just be like honest and have fun and laugh at yourself, and obviously make fun of each other, as you guys do. But it's just a welcoming, fun, not soft environment, but just a good, positive environment.
Yeah, I think it all goes back to being authentic, right? And I think that you guys picked up on that. I think Ben and Megan and your whole family feel that way because you know everything about my life, good and bad, right? We put our hearts out there. And that's the scary part about broadcasting and podcasting, as I'm sure you're going to see. It's like, hey, am I the only guy that feels this way or thinks this way? Are people going to relate to what I'm saying? Is this going to stick? Is this going to be funny? You know, you're really taking chances and you're putting your soul and opinions out there all the time. But I think why it feels like family, or why you feel that way about us, is because you know everything about us. Like, we never held back. And that was also the key. And we were never shock jocks, but we were as real as we could authentically be, you know?
And then to backtrack a little bit, how did you and Rich come together? And then how did you get that break to have the opportunity to represent the Maxim Radio?
Rich was, as I've joked about for years, the what did they call him? Oh my God. The nighttime hottie on Z100, right? And I would be doing as many shifts as I could on K-Rock New York. Like, basically, if someone called out, or late night shifts, and people would call my request lines and be like, yeah, do you know Rich Davis on Z100? You sound like Rich. I'm like, fuck that guy, you know? And I would go on auditions for VH1 or MTV, and, you know, whatever I could try to be a part of, whatever audition I was able to get. And they would be like, you know Rich Davis? I'm like, fuck this guy. I would always hear about this guy. And then one of my buddies at K-Rock eventually got a job at Z100. And then we started hanging out, and I met this guy named Nico, right? Nico Petru. He's a Greek kid from Detroit, and he's a radio great. He's in Arizona now. He's a broadcaster. He's fantastic what he does. I became friends with this guy, Nico. He was a host on Z100. And he's like, I think you and my buddy Rich would get along. I'm like, I keep hearing about this motherfucker Rich, right? So eventually I met Rich at a club in Hoboken. I'm like, there he is. There's Rich. And he was out there throwing T-shirts, and I thought he wasn't even working. He was just like being a cheese ball, like a cheese wiener, handing shit out at this club. I'm like, hey, what's up, man? And because New York radio was such a small circle, and we were all around the same age at the same time, and sort of on the same come up path, like on the same level, we all became friends. And I was already at Sirius XM, I think, at that time. And then Rich eventually ended up at Sirius because I was doing rock stuff at Sirius. Then Rich came to Sirius to do pop music. And the Maxim Radio idea came up about 2 years later. And I'm like, yo, Rich, this is the shit we talk about when we're hanging, when we're just out at dinner. Like, we could do this. I had stacks of Maxim magazines in my bathroom, like my whole life, reading that shit. And you knew the routines. I'm like, this is us. We could do this. And Gary Delabate at the time, because I was still working full-time in terrestrial radio, part-time at Sirius XM at Sirius. Gary Delabate from the Howard Stern show reached out and said, hey, if you're looking for somebody for the Maxim thing, Covino already works there. He's your guy. He lives that life. So he put in the good word. I got an audition. Jim McClure, who you may know from the Howard Stern days, hired me and wanted to hire Rich and I separately as separate hosts. But we knew we were better together. Like, we could have easily both have done our own shows.
Yeah.
But we knew our chemistry. We were a lot more similar then, or at least we thought we were. We hadn't explored all of our real differences yet. Yeah. That came out, I guess, shortly after. Like, yeah, we have a lot in common, but man, like, you're a Mets guy, I'm a Yankees guy.
Yeah.
And we were very opposite in a lot of ways. And I think that complemented each other. And that's how we sort of got together.
And to say, so you guys are buddies off air, like meeting out at the club or whatever and living a similar life, but there's no guarantee without having already done a show. So if you would have gone if you would have pitched Covino and Rich to, the powers that be at Sirius, that would make more sense to me. But to not have produced a show together, understand that we're buddies off air, there was no guarantee that would translate into radio cohesion on it.
Oh, no. It's funny about that, though. It's funny you say that. There was no guarantee whatsoever. Rich and I were just so dumb, young, and confident that the thought of it not working at all never even dawned. I swear, I know it's things people say. We were so dumb, or so, like I said, maybe it was ego. I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes ego might work to your advantage. I don't know. We never thought it couldn't work. We never thought of the possibility, this could suck and no one's going to care. We were just so excited, for something new, that it was just what we were doing. But they tested us out with different people. I did test shows with my buddy Demos, who I knew from K-Rock. He's on the Spectrum now on Sirius XM. I did test shows with Madison, who's on Lithium and Alt Nation. And, because we were all on the same come up. And we were all great together, but me and Rich, we just knew each other on more of that friendly bro sort of relationship. Yeah. And Rich, I knew Rich could take a joke and take a ribbing, and I could be that guy to make it fun. Like, Rich is good at that. He's better at me than me at taking some ribbing, and just made it funny, just made it fun.
It's funny that you say that, because when I listen to the show, and anytime you listen to an interview, any sort of conversation, right, an on-air conversation, you can feel like some tension in you when you sense tension in one of the hosts. And I feel like I absolutely recognize you feeling tension and taking stuff more personally than anyone else on the show does. Now that
I'm not good at that. I'm not good at that, but that's why the balance is there, And if anyone can give me a hard time at this point, it's definitely Rich, but he takes, because he's so cheesy and he puts himself out there for so much criticism, but he owns that cheesy.
Yeah,
he owns it.
That's a perfect word. That's a perfect word. So earlier when I said dork, I think cheesy is a perfect explanation of it. And that's why Ben loves you. And that's why Ben's my brother. And that's why I'm drawn to you guys, is because you can take a joke and make a joke of yourself when applicable.
Well, dude, you're a Philly guy, right? We're East Coast dudes. Rich is from Long Island. I'm from Union, New Jersey, right? I swear to you, I had never met a guy like Rich ever on the East Coast. I thought he was like the biggest phony I'd ever met. I'm like, there's no way there's some guy, this Mayor McCheese, this cheesy and happy-go-lucky to be alive. I told my friends, like, hey guys, don't pick on him. And he's like a really nice guy. When I was like bringing him around my hometown friends, they were like, I don't know about this dude, man. What's his deal? I'm like, no, he's really that nice. I swear to you, bro. And I'm sure you can relate. Like,
that's why I'm laughing so hard, because I feel like that's him on
yeah.
air.
And now I'm so used to him. But at first I was like, I'd never been exposed to anybody like that who wasn't a phony asshole.
Yeah.
He's just the guy that really owns, like, hey, I like all this corny shit. I'm a good looking dude. Like, fuck it. That's who I am. I'm a cheesy guy. And I'm like, okay. And it worked, man. It worked, because for as cheesy as he is, he owns it. That's what makes him cool. And I respected that. And that's what made the show cool and fun. And, here we are almost 17 years later, but again, no longer on Sirius XM as far as Covino and Rich. Luckily, we both still work there on the music side.
Yeah.
But Covino and Rich, we had to take our talents to South Beach to Patreon.
Yeah, and we'll get into that here in a minute.
Yeah.
I want to backtrack a little bit. You had mentioned going to auditions. I think you said MTV, VH1.
Yeah.
Like, what were you auditioning for? Was it I'm a host and I just want to host something, or was it any area of entertainment?
I don't know. I guess I was feeling myself, man. And I thought I should be on TV. I was young. And the coolest thing at the time was like TRL and MTV and shit like that. And I've never been a top 40 pop guy, but I looked like that. I had that sort of image. I could pull that off. I could be that guy on MTV. That's what I was thinking. I could be that dude. I love music. I could do that. Music was the driving force behind all of this shit. I wouldn't have done talk radio. I wouldn't have gone into radio, period, if it wasn't for music, right? I never had goals to be a talk radio host. I just wanted to get involved in the music world and do that sort of thing. So I would audition for anything at MTV to be a host primarily. Even would do the Who Wants to Be what were those contests used to do? Like, Who Wants to Be a VJ? Like, be a VJ thing. I would do all that shit. Yeah. And then the same thing with VH1. They would always bring us in for, guys like Rich, guys like me, for like, hey, what do you think of this band? And you'd have to just shoot off the hip and give your musical opinions for whatever show they were doing. And yeah, that shit just never worked out the way I thought it would. But luckily we got the radio opportunity, and eventually we started doing TV in New York, but sports. We found our niche in sports, and we're sports fans. We're not really even sports. We're not sports experts, that's for sure, but we found our niche in sports and talk radio.
And I want to add on a little bit to what you said there. I was on Pros versus, so I was a Spanish teacher, and then I was on Pros versus Joes back in 2006, the spring of 2006 on Spike TV. And I remember when I came back from there, I got headshots taken. Okay.
Yeah.
So I had no idea what that word headshot meant. I didn't know that you get pictures taken, and I didn't know what you used them for. I just knew a guy that was on the show talking about headshots, and he showed me a picture. I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know what I was getting them for. And then I remember auditioning for, I don't think it was from Craigslist, but there was a website that was like Craigslist, except it was for like extras and or casting calls for reality TV show stuff. I forget what it was called, but I would apply for stuff. One was an island, something or other. It wasn't like
Penn Island? PennIsland.com?
No.
PennIsland.com. Look it up, guys. PennIsland.com.
That's a classic.
Your brother Ben knows what I'm talking about.
But I would apply for stuff like that too, and then end up being the Ultimate Fighter, and then just random stuff for what I didn't know. I just knew I wanted to do something, and it took me ultimately to fighting. And then on the other side of that is this role in podcasting and or hosting. But I just enjoyed talking and entertaining and being entertained and asking questions. So it was like I kind of found my niche as well after the fact.
It's a rare niche to have, man, because you've been there, you've been in the octagon, you've done it. And to have this other side of you is rare, and it's awesome. I rarely see it. That's why you see some dudes make it in that world after fighting and some don't. Some just, hey, I was a fighter and that's all I do. And then some guys step up and they're like, oh man, there's more to me than that. And I always think that's super cool. And, working at ESPN, I've met a lot of those guys where I'm like, oh man, this guy, he's just a natural, or he must've been really into that aside from his sport.
Yeah, it's interesting because I ask Ben that often because he's more into sports than I am. Like he knows the names, and I'll just text him and say, "What about this?" Blah blah blah. But I noticed that the hosts, like especially football, like the commentators, they're not necessarily like the best players that ever lived. They're just dudes that could have had a successful career, might have been okay, might not have known them, maybe famous, but you're right, they wanted to continue in that, whether it's entertainment, whether it's performance, whatever. And continue on.
Well, because most athletes, I hate to, call them out, they're not really that good at it. Yeah. They might be media trained, know how to answer a few questions here and there, but there's no interest in doing that shit. And they're just not good with the gift of gab, So, and when I see that, hats off to you for wanting to keep it going and staying out there. And like I said, putting yourself out there. Because that's what you're doing. You're putting yourself out there for criticism and hoping people like it.
And what you mentioned earlier about putting yourself out there and not knowing which way it's going to go. I've heard I think Rogan is who I specifically heard say this, but comedians, when you tell a joke, you don't know if the crowd's going to laugh or if the crowd's going to be like, silence.
Dude, yeah.
On radio.
Oh, by the way, that goes back to Rich. He laughed at all my stupid shit, and like, I don't know, like Rogan said, this is corny. I know it's corny. He laughed at my corny shit. And then that laughter's contagious. I'm like, it makes me feel comfortable to want to take more chances, to be funnier. Oh, Rich was a good audience to my impressions and things like that. Like, oh, okay. And you start building that confidence, and then you realize other people like it. And you need that, man. You need that good balance, that back and forth. And you're doing your own thing, but I'm sure you're getting that validation from people that hit you up, or even your family that are like, yeah, man, that was really good, So
that's been something for me is when either one of my close friends and or one of my siblings, which is rare, will text me and say, that was a really good interview with so-and-so. And whenever your family's listening, then like, okay, this is legit. They're not, they don't care about me, like not in a negative way, but they don't need to hear me talk, right? They're listening because it's good conversation, and that is certainly validating. Another person that I think of that is kind of connected to Salmon a little bit, but I think of him in the same realm as you guys, is Ariel Helwani. And Ariel from MMA is one of the for anyone listening, if you don't know him, Ariel is really big in mixed martial arts commentating, also works with ESPN to some degree, or NBA. But when I was living in North Jersey, I think it was Versus. He was on a show on Versus, and I would travel in and out of New York to be on his show. I forget the guy's name off the top of my head who hosted a show on Versus. It was like a sports show on Versus. But that was another example of being exposed to TV early on and being behind the scenes, getting to see hosts and being actually on camera and audio, and having to learn how to like talk when you should talk and shut up when you should shut up, because there's an ebb and flow to it.
Well, he's another great, and you're learning from really, in my opinion, credible people. But from my standpoint, my time at ESPN was really cool because I got to also work with people that I was also a fan of, like Ariel Helwani. As a fight guy, I'm a fight fan. Yeah, I'd see his opinions on UFC all the time, and I'd respect and want to hear what he had to say about it. So to have him as part of my show and talk to him and know his story was so cool. He's got a really interesting story. I don't even know if you know it, but he told me his story, and he wanted to get more involved in basketball. And I know he's like a big baseball fan as well, but he was like, you know what? I think this UFC thing is my ticket in.
Yep.
And if I start from the ground up and this explodes like I think it's going to, then I'll just be the guy to grow with it. So he learned the sport as it was growing. Honestly, not dedicating myself to being a part of what was happening in the UFC is one of my biggest regrets, because I'm such a boxing fan, as you know. I'm such a boxing guy because I grew up in a boxing family. We watched all the pay-per-views, all the fights. That was sort of my thing. That was my bonding thing, especially growing up on my mom's side, especially with all the Mexican side, right? But because I was such a fight fan, when UFC started and Tough Man, you remember the Tough Man competitions, things like that. When that became a thing, I was on it from day one. My parents, I was a spoiled brat. They would buy me every pay-per-view because I was interested. and I was a good kid, the best kid. And man, I'm talking the big Dan Severn days, the Gracies, like early on, the Shamrocks, like the fat sumo guy versus, the little dude.
Yeah.
I was watching that stuff. And like I said, Tough Man, Butterbean, fighting all these different people. If I would have just continued to really grow with the UFC as the UFC grew, I probably would have been more knowledgeable in it. And that's why I'm so impressed with what Ariel did, because he made that for himself, which is awesome.
Yeah, I actually had him on the show. It's been years. I bet it's been 4 years. But listeners, if you want to listen to that, just type in Spaniard Show, Ariel Helwani. But he does tell that story of finding that, hey, no one knows this right now, but I feel this is going to happen. And then staying that course, which takes a lot of balls.
But the foresight to see that and the commitment to do that and then to deliver. He's a really knowledgeable guy, respect him a lot, and had a really great rapport with him. And that is a regret. And I just realized that recently. I'm like, yo, I was in on that shit since day one. And then I just stayed in my boxing lane and I would just watch the main events. I always loved UFC, but not to the Helwani level of I should have. And Rich's regret is wrestling, and Sam took, Rich sees what Sam does, Sam Roberts, and Rich is like, fuck, if I just would have stuck with it, I could have been doing that. But we didn't.
It's funny, man. I now I look to you guys as kind of professional role models or professional mentors, but I'm hoping to get Sam on the show someday. We've communicated over the years as well. But he's a perfect example. You, Ariel, him are all perfect examples of finding your spot and also the persistence over time. And I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned you were trying for this, trying for that, your time on ESPN, Sirius XM, the different stuff on Sirius XM, like you work. And that's what I respect the most about Sam specifically, because I was listening to Opie and Anthony when they were like at their biggest before everything kind of fell apart. But Sam would just, man, it was like speak softly and carry big stick. He would just be there. He would chime in when it's like he understood where he was at and he understood
his role.
Okay, I'm not carrying the show, but I'm here. I'm adding some, but it's just work. And that's one of the things I respect about you guys is, I hear Rich over here doing this. I see you over here doing that. You're just working. So speak a little bit to the necessity of persistence over time in order to make it, right? And I know that making it is a relative term, but to staying relevant, the persistent work over time in order to stay relevant in radio, and that can extrapolate to anything.
Well, one of my listener friends from the show said something that stuck with me always. He's like, relevance is a choice. So I think first you need to make that commitment to stay relevant, because otherwise you're a dinosaur. Who wants to listen to some dude who doesn't know what the hell's going on in today's world, right? So you have to make that commitment to be like, yeah, I got to be on top of things. I got to be on it. I don't want to be the old guy who doesn't know shit. And then as far as just like persistence, man, I think you have to have that work ethic in you, right? You have to have that. And you learn that, I think, from home. I think my parents instilled a work ethic. And I think Rich and I, because of our work ethic, we just outlasted everybody. I never stopped trying. Like, even when it looked like I wasn't going to make it in radio, because I thought about it. I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to take the fireman's test. I don't know. This radio thing's not happening. And by the way, I would have been the worst fireman. It's just the opportunities were sort of there, maybe, or I was thinking about it. But I feel like I saw so many people leave and give up and quit and say, man, I'm giving up on this dream. Rich and I just kept going and just outlasted all of those people. So, you bring Sam into this, and it's easier to speak probably on behalf of him sometimes than myself. It's about taking those opportunities that other people aren't taking. That's really it too. Like, I think about Sam, I think about myself, I think you're right. And we're all intertwined, right? In a way, right? We all know each other, which is wild. We all did shit that we didn't want to do. And there's so many people in today's world that don't want to do shit, right? So I think that's the difference maker. And I think it's nice to see sometimes hard work paying off. And I think back to all those overnight shifts, all those bullshit shifts, all the bullshit that Sam used to do on other channels that he didn't even belong on, but he was like, yeah, I'll take any opportunity because I want people to know. Eventually, I think, as Macho Man says, the cream rises to the top because you put that work in, man. And I don't know if people recognize it or it's good karma or, you know, or it's luck or maybe a little of everything. But I think it's the persistence, like you said, and just the willingness to do what other people weren't willing to do. You know, how did I get on the radio? I lied and said, yeah, I know how to run the board. But you got to be on New Year's Eve. Fuck, New Year's Eve? Yeah, and I missed like 10 New Year's Eves in a row, and lost girlfriend after girlfriend after girlfriend because I was working all the time. You know, so it's the sacrifice.
Yeah, you know, before moving forward with kind of the serious and then leaving serious, earlier we talked a little bit about podcasting and running a radio show, and it's, I remember kind of way back earlier, someone explained podcasting to me as on-demand radio, right? So they're without a doubt connected, meaning I'm in front of a microphone, I'm recording conversations. Sometimes it's live, sometimes it's not. You know, your show's live. What is the difference between a radio show and a podcast? And this is subjective, right? Because you know, everyone can say different things, but just your idea as a professional radio host.
I think there's a lot of similarities, right? But a lot of differences. And I'll start with the pay scale. You know, I don't think I'm saying too much by saying that SiriusXM wanted to keep the Covino and Rich show, right? But because podcast is the new model and is the new way, they wanted to pay us on a podcast model. Most podcasts are like 1 to 3 times a week. So the old mentality is like, yeah, no, we're on Monday through Friday, like live for 3 hours a day. But the new model says, yeah, but that's not really necessary. So we're not going to pay you for 5 days a week, 3 hours a day, 15 hours a week. We're going to pay you for like 1 to 3 hours a week. And when they want to pay you, when a company wants to pay you for 1 to 3 hours a week, if you don't have sponsors, they're cutting your pay by a lot.
Yep.
So, you know what I mean? So when they're saying, hey, we'll pay you for like an hour, maybe 3 hours a week, at that point, Rich and I might as well do it on our own. And SiriusXM was cool enough to be like, hey, man, good luck. If you still want to do the music stuff, we'd love to have you. So that worked out great, you know, but it was a shock. We're like, wow. So the whole podcast model is the new model. You know, there's no real need for that every day, 3 hours a day. But for me, that's still what radio is, or that's what Rich and I could do that makes our podcast different, right? Podcast doesn't have necessarily that live feel that a radio show would, or the live interaction, the phone calls, which I think is still a cool part of broadcasting. You know, I understand the intrigue of no interruptions and just listening to someone talk for an hour at a time. But Rich and I are better than that. That's the truth. That's the experience we've gained throughout the years. Someone could do a podcast for an hour a week. I could do that in my sleep.
Yeah.
Because we've been doing this so long, right? So I could do 3 hours at a time. And before I know it, like the show's over, like, oh, wow. So because we're able to give more, we're willing to do more. But I think the biggest differences are the fact that people treat this like their hobby, which is great. I'm not knocking that. It's their hobby. It's very niche, which is cool because that's what people want. I'm going to do it for like an hour, which is great. But the difference is Rich and I are going to do it for 3 hours, and we're going to do it every day because it's not our hobby. This is what we do. You know, this is what we built a career doing. This is what we've loved. This is what we're like trained to do in a lot of ways, you know, like, so I think those are the big differences. You know, like even Joe Rogan, you know, you think of him, he's the biggest podcaster, right? But what does he do? 3 days a week, right? He's like 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Now think about when Covino and Rich started, we were doing like, at one point between Bleacher Report and Covino and Rich, I think at one point we were doing 6 hours a day. But the standard sort of was 4 hours every day. So Rogan does how many hours
About
a week?
probably 7 to 9
So he does 3 3-hour shows,
ish.
right? Radio, which is again, it's an older man's game. 4 hours. That's 20. You're talking about 7 to 9 hours versus 4 hours times 5. Howard Stern is doing about 20 something hours a week, which isn't a lot. I'm saying, but there's a difference there as far as the time you're putting in. So, hey man, can you capture and engage an audience to care in today's world where people have no attention span? Can you keep them for more than an hour? Most people can't. You know, I think that's where our skill comes into play. And then there's like, there's just different business models with podcasters. There's a lot of like, hey, what are your numbers? People are here for you. What are your numbers? What's the time spent listening? And all these things matter in regular radio too. But it seems to be different in podcasting because if you're working for a radio station, maybe they could sell packages as part of the station. If you're on your own, as you know, like if your numbers don't amount to anything, how are you going to make money if sponsors don't see those numbers?
Yeah. And I mean, to be completely upfront and open book, that's why I don't make any money from the podcast, because I don't have
right. You're doing it for the love of it.
Yeah, I don't have a listener base. No one's going to actually reap a return on investment at this point, unless they say, "Hey, we believe in you, man, and we're going to help you. We're going to support you now for the payoff in 10 years."
So that's my point. I took like a backward way to get there, but like radio gave us a place to build an audience, right? So whether that be terrestrial radio or satellite radio, I mean, you're still building an audience that's there for you, right? Like, hey, I'm on the radio. People are listening. You can't just like start a podcast and find people to listen to you. Yeah, unless you're a celebrity, which they can obviously do and easily do. And that's why it's a game changer, man. And like I said, it is, but now it's like, hey, Rich and I got to take it further because we're better than some random comedian that's funny, but can he be funny for more than an hour, more than a few days a week? We want to build on consistency and let people know what we're doing is a little different, but it's not an easy game, but as we discovered in, work ethic and just being a good dude, the cream rises to the top.
Yeah. I want to add a couple points to that. One, it was a great job of differentiating between the two, but one of the things that Covino said was, 3 hours a day. People think, oh, you only work 3 hours a day. It's not 3 hours a day. It's more. So my show, right? So I record a daily show based on this on my podcast. That's 5 minutes based on a book. There's an hour reading. There's 20 minutes of prep. There's 5 minutes recording. There's uploading. So it is a lot of time. On your end of it, it's prepping for interviews. It's watching the news, which is part of your life in general, but
yeah, that's shit I would do normally. Yeah.
But you do have to take notes. You have to keep it fresh, top of mind, et cetera. And with podcasting, it's funny when you're mentioning that, I'm thinking, boy, that's what I want. I want broadcasting to be more a part of my life. I want it to a degree to be my life. I enjoy talking. I enjoy the interacting. I often wish I had a bigger fan base so I could interact on a regular basis, because you develop relationships with people. I might have 15 people over the last 5 years that I've built a real kind of fan, now friend relationship with. It just makes my life better. I like talking to those people and I enjoy interacting.
But you know what, man, it's a hard code to crack. It really is. And just because we had a built-in audience doesn't mean like, oh, everything's great. Like we're still trying to get new people, more people the same way you are. And the only thing is there's no blueprint. It's just like, how does a video go viral?
Yeah.
Right. You can't force that to happen. Like it just happens organically or it doesn't. Or maybe you get celebrities to spread the word or, there are ways, but, it's just a matter of people really digging what you do and word getting out and finding some sort of loyalty and creating a fan base. And, I'm having a lot of fun on your show, man. I think you're going to do great in this world. And you already are, and I think there's such an audience for you, especially because the fight world is so big.
Yep.
So there's automatically an interest like, oh yeah, he's a former fighter. That's awesome.
Someone actually asked me today, they asked me how I get guests on the show. And I said, well, cold outreach. And I said, the fact that I can say UFC fighter helps. no matter
That
what.
definitely
It
helps.
doesn't matter
Yeah.
who or what it is. It's like, whoa, that's
Yeah.
weird.
So you got to ride that for sure, because it gives you at least some sort of backing. Like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You know
Yeah.
who you got to get on your show? I don't want, I don't want to act like producer, but Alan Joban. You know Alan Joban?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's again
Yeah.
in that world of, he just retired and he's trying to do more and more broadcasting. And he's a super handsome guy, so he's on TV a lot talking
Yeah.
about fights. And he was on my ESPN radio show a lot. But
Reach out
when
to
I was
him.
talking to him, I'm like, this guy's good, man. And I know he really wants to dive more into that podcast world
Yeah.
as well. So
Oh,
yeah, he's a cool
absolutely.
dude.
I'll reach out to him.
Yeah.
One of the main differences that you just stated that I want to get your take on. So you guys have moved from, at least for the Covino and Rich, you've moved from Sirius XM over to Patreon. A kind of a side question: Do you own, or was there any whatever with Covino and Rich? Like you have?
Yeah, we're good with it.
You have that brand. Okay.
Yeah, we're just in the process of getting our archives. They're working something out where, yeah, you can have them if you need them, like that sort of thing. With SiriusXM, again, we still work there, and I'm like, we're on all these different channels. I'm on Turbo. I'm on Lithium this week filling in. I'm on Boneyard. Turbo is my main music home, but no, there was no issue there. They're like, all right, hey, good luck. And now Patreon is a completely different business model, right? Because that's subscriber based. And I knew what it was, of course, but we were seeing the success too that like Jason Ellis was having. And of course that planted a seed and said, well, hey, I mean, we didn't know at the time. This all sort of happened really fast. But knowing that he was having success and his loyalty and his fan base followed him there, and he was doing okay, and he was getting subscribers, like, hey, maybe we could try this. And for your listeners who don't know, Patreon is not a free broadcast. It's not a free podcast. And everybody wants free. Everybody wants free. So what we're doing is almost even a little harder, because we're saying, yeah, to have our show, you got to pay for us. But if people like you enough, it's like cable on demand. It's like, hey, I'll pay for shit I'm willing or wanting to watch. So luckily we were able to have a base at SiriusXM, and those people subscribe to our show through Patreon. But no problems with SiriusXM. And this business model has been working for us because it gives us that stability. But we're our own bosses now, which is odd,
freedom.
So yeah,
it also gives you freedom, which is huge in my freedom and creative control. I don't know how much you did or didn't have that on Sirius, but that is also an element of it that you just whatever you want.
Well, the big difference is SiriusXM, it's uncensored, right? But you still have a boss, and you still don't want to ever say anything that could get you in trouble or make the company look bad, right? Because you want to be professional. What I noticed here is, I'm only accountable for me. But as your own boss, well, right? So if someone listened to our show on SiriusXM and they didn't like me, they're like, well, I don't like you either. Fuck yourself, right? But now if someone's coming at me on Patreon, they're subscribing just to me, right? So I can't tell that dude to like, yeah, dude, beat it. Because now I got to play customer service and be a good business owner and say, hey, man, we might disagree on some things, but thanks for subscribing, And I noticed there's a different sense of ownership from our listener base now. Like, hey, man, I subscribe to you. Like, you got to do what I say. But it's because it's new to everybody to some degree. So we're all learning it together.
One of the things I want to ask is when you do a podcast, I schedule this interview with you at 4:00 my time, 1:00 your time, and I can, I work together. When you have a live show, you're there, right? You're there every day.
Yeah.
Was it 8 to 11 or 8 to 12? So does that play a factor in any, because when you do a podcast, you can schedule around your life. When you have a live show, you're there. Like you've got to be there. Does that play any role in your thinking?
I like it, man. I know that most podcasters probably have this comfort of, I'll do a show whenever I want, the freedoms of doing that. And hey, if I mess up, I can always edit that. Like Rich and I, this is what we do. So let's do it live. And there's no fear in that when it comes to radio. TV is different. I always have the, oh man, live TV. But radio, bam, let's get it out. And we wanted to keep that consistency and live feel going. So we were on in the morning. Let's keep it live in the morning now so that we could still have like normal lives after the show.
Yeah.
I could pick my kid up from school and, enjoy the rest of my day. I didn't want to do a show in the middle of the day, especially for our own boss. You want to be on in the mornings when people are in the car. It's when people are traveling, commuting, or they used to, before the pandemic. And, I just think it was an easy, natural transition for us to be like, yeah, mornings, live. Let's just keep the audience we had and bring them over here.
And then, real quick, I do want to mention the guac off. That was one of my favorite. I'm like getting like nostalgic right now thinking about it. But you guys would do Super Bowl shows, and you have the guac off, and that was. And again, I was fighting during this time, so I was driving up and down New Jersey, in and out of New York, like traffic the whole time, and just hearing you guys do these fun. It's like you just hang out with your buddies, buddies that you'd meet.
Yeah, dude. Oh my God. I mean, it's the blessing and the curse of that. The blessing and the curse is, it was fun as could be, like you said. Like we would throw a fiesta every year, and all of our colleagues would look forward to it. I hope they miss us next Cinco de Mayo. I really do. What did I say? Every time you dip your chip in someone else's guac, I hope you feel it. And every time you dip your chip in someone else's guac, I hope you feel it. I hope SiriusXM feels that every year, because we're not doing it anymore. But because we would have that much fun, and everyone there, the coolest part about working at SiriusXM was all the walks of life that were walking around. Like you said, the fishbowl, the different genres, the channels, the hosts. Hey, there's Baba Booey. Hey, there's Sway. Hey, there's Jose from Liquid Metal. Hey, hey, there's Hulk Hogan. Oh, hey, there's Nate Diaz. I mean, there's always someone walking around. So when we would throw these parties for Cinco de Mayo, everybody would show up. We would all get together, the country dude, the hip hop dude, the rock guy, and we would have a fun time and drink, so it was great. The curse is, that's like what we became known for. Yeah. And it was our, I don't want to say our worst radio, but like we were the guacamole guys. And there's so much more to what we do. And all you guys know is that we do the guacamole thing, and it almost took on a life of itself. And again, for those who don't know, we would do a Cinco de Mayo guacamole competition, like a blind taste test, and celebrities and hosts would be involved, and someone would take home the golden molcajete. And I still hope to do that to some level, with our podcast or our Patreon, and just need more people to see it grow,
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome, man. I got to head upstairs here and take my daughter. She has the baseball game, but it's been really cool.
Hell yeah.
I've been excited to do this for a long time. And I respect you and Rich and Spot is their producer.
Of course.
Listeners. But, it's been great. And we're fans, continue to be fans. And I wish you guys the best of luck and success and fortune moving forward. And it's awesome. It's really cool. And
Thank you, man.
Been awesome to see.
Well, I'm glad to have inspired you just a tiny bit to do this, and I think what you're doing is great. And I think you just got to dive in head first. Failure's not an option. Keep bringing guests on, and just keep being you. And hopefully, for both of us, we're in the same boat for the most part. Like we said, the cream rises to the top. Yep. Hard work pays off, and we all live great lives. And for your fans and listeners out there, please check out our best of the week podcast is absolutely free. So if you're on the fence, like, yeah, I don't know, this guy sucks, he's all right, I don't know, we take our best of the week on Patreon, which is paid. We have 2 tiers, one where you could just listen, and then the other you could watch and listen. We have video with behind the velvet rope options and things like that, like personal interaction. You could hear our best of the week for free. Just search Covino and Rich. And if you have SiriusXM, check me out on Turbo every weeknight. That's channel 41. And Rich is on Pop 2K. And all of us, we're at Covino and Rich. And I'm at Steve Covino on social media. And dude, thank you, man. I'm happy to be on your show, man. It's a lot of fun to, like I said, be on this side of things,
It's been a pleasure. And if people do want to check it out, what's the best either handle, social media, and or website to check out your Patreon?
Everything's at covinoandrich.com. It's patreon.com/covinoandrich. So again, $5 a month. A cup of coffee gets you a month of live entertainment. We do a 2.5 to 3 hour show every day. And it's a lot of fun with, again, video options. And I feel like our show has gone next level because of the raw and the realness, and because of the video features that we're able to put out there. And Spot has done a great job producing it. And I think people will be really pleasantly surprised to see what we're doing. You're probably thinking, oh man, they're not on Sirius XM anymore. Yeah, but look what we're doing now. I think you'll be impressed. And we're still in the process of making a new studio. So yeah, I don't think we've peaked yet, man. So
yeah,
stay tuned.
I will, and I'm excited for it. And it's just really cool. It's good radio, and I'm a podcast guy. I listen to podcasts, obviously produce a podcast, but it is very refreshing when I listen to you guys and when I see you guys, because it is something different, and it's, has
butt cheeks to Bitcoin, bro. From butt cheeks to Bitcoin, from living the dad life. We're all dads now for the most part, right? So it's a show that grew together, and we experience things together, and we open up together. And I'm just glad cool guys like you are a part of it, man.
Well, I appreciate it, buddy. Thanks for being here, Covino.
Anytime, man. Anytime, for real. And say hey to Ben and Megan and all the Spaniard fans out there.